Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We are recording our 10th episode, full movie episode, and we are doing this episode on Minority Report, which came out in 2002. I actually thought it was a little later than that, but 2002. It's based off a short story by Philip K. Dick, and the screenplay was written by Scott Frank and John Cohen. And it stars, and it was, of course, directed by the amazing Steven Spielberg, starring Tom Cruise,
Colin Farrell,
Samantha Morton, and Max von Sydow.
I did want to talk about why we're doing it, though.
I did have a dream. Basically I had a dream where we were at my parents' house, and my wife brought home like 20-some people. Mm-hmm. Rowdy people that were ready to party. Basically, they, found a place to party. So, my parents had something planned there, and I was like, Jordan, you can't have these guys come in. You gotta tell them to leave. Right. So she told them, and they weren't too happy. So the next day, we found like some people walking around, and they were like dressed in hoods and coats and everything. And I followed, like they were going around back, so I went downstairs, and they were coming in our back door and had guns and just started shooting everywhere. And I ended up hiding in some bushes. Mm-hmm. And kind of woke up, and it had been like a little bit of time had passed, and they killed everyone in my family. Jeez. Yeah, my wife had been killed, my parents had been killed. They didn't know about my kids, but it turned out that I was like in the year 2035 or something. So it was kind of like Flight of the Navigator.
Right.
But something that I had been thinking about that dream was, what if... And that was another thing, was even though it had been years, I think I was concerned about being, investigated or assumed to be, the perpetrator or whatever. So I was thinking about pre-crime. And about how if that were real, that they would know it wasn't me.
Right.
So I thought about Minority Report.
That's cool. And that's why we're talking about it now.
Yeah. So we chose to do the podcast because of a dream.
Very interesting. Hey, guys, real quick before we get started, I just wanted to let you guys know that if you are planning on making any Amazon.com purchases, check out cinemaheroes.com first. We have an Amazon ad. You can click on that. It'll take you to Amazon's website. And after you've made your purchase, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but we get a small percentage of however much you spend, and that goes towards our podcasting costs and whatnot. So we'd really appreciate it if you, like I said, if you see yourself making any Amazon purchases. So there's that.
Yeah. So let's get into it. I saw Minority Report in the theater.
Me too.
And I remember being really impressed with it.
Yeah, I loved it. I saw it in the theater too. Which it came out a year after AI, which I actually didn't see until it came out on DVD. But it also came out the same year as Catch Me If You Can. But I remember Catch Me If You Can came out around the Christmas season, so I'm pretty sure Minority Report came out during the summer. Mm-hmm. But I was really impressed with Minority Report. I thought it was a really fairly smart sci-fi flick and suspenseful.
Yeah, I think this was one of the first sci-fi films that I can think of. Especially our generation of movies, where it was the future, but it was a very believable future. Right.
It wasn't that far into the future either. It was like 2054.
Right. Well, I mean, when it came out, that's 50 years.
Sure.
But the technology wasn't, It seemed like in 50 years these people could have this. I don't know what it was like when Back to the Future 2 came out and people saw flying cars and it was 2015, and they're like, oh, we're definitely going to have that then.
Right.
These were self-driving cars.
Right. They weren't flying either. They were
right,
like attached almost to the interstate, it looked like, or maybe just to the roads. And that's, we'll obviously get to that point, but that's an awesome action sequence in the movie, is that essentially kind of revamped car chase scene where he gets out of it and he's jumping from car to car. Real quick, I wanted to talk about the writers of the movie, Scott Frank and John Cohen. Scott Frank, I know. I've heard of him before. He's directed, he's written quite a few movies, a lot of adaptations, really. He did Get Shorty and Out of Sight. Most currently, he co-wrote The Wolverine. And he also did a movie called The Lookout with Joseph Gordon-Levitt that was really good. But John Cohen I had never heard of, so I decided to look John Cohen up while I was watching the movie. And this movie is his only credit. He's never written anything else.
Interesting.
Very interesting. So I'm not sure who he is exactly or why. I mean, he has no other credits at all. He's not even a producer on anything else. It's just
maybe he came up with a really good idea.
I get, but I mean, it's based on the short story by Philip K. Dick. But I've never read the short story, so I don't know how much has been changed, or if maybe John Cohen's idea was too similar to Philip K. Dick's idea, and they had to give. I don't know. It's very. I'm curious to see, or to hear what happened there.
Why don't you stalk him like Edward Burns?
I don't stalk Edward Burns. Just to let everybody know, we were talking about Edward Burns right before we started recording. And apparently John has surmised that I stalk him, even though I've just met him one time at a screening of his movie, of one of his films.
So, they bring you right into, their world from the beginning. The famous computer scene. Which is still cool to watch.
It's an awesome setup for the beginning of the movie. It gives us a lot of insight into who they are and what they're doing. And it also kind of makes you think about maybe the consequences right off the bat of what, they're arresting people for a crime they technically didn't commit because they were stopped from committing it.
Right. And that's, I think, a big question of this movie, kind of like to make you think. They go into that a little bit more. But yeah, you have the man, and he's going to murder his wife, which they show what are they called, the three people?
The precogs.
Yeah. So you're introduced to the precogs, and they have a vision, which is the very beginning of the movie, and then a ball rolls down with someone's name on it.
A wooden ball.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and the precogs are three people who are kind of all hooked together, sort of, psychically speaking, and they have an ability to predict not just the future, but future murders, specifically.
Right, they go into that, like, murder is somehow just stronger to be able to be picked up.
Right, exactly. And so whenever a murder is about to take place, the precogs envision it, and a wooden ball is carved with a victim's name on it, and then another ball is carved with the murderer's name on it.
Yeah. This was a special case, though, because they called it a red ball.
Right, which means which I think most of them are red balls, which they say in the beginning, because red balls mean that it was not predetermined. Meaning
that's
that
right.
It's going to happen.
This program has been around in specifically Washington, D.C., and they're trying to take a vote on it that it will make it federal.
National, right.
Yeah. And so they mentioned that because it's been around, what is it?
6 years.
6 years no one had been murdered?
That's right.
Yeah. So people are not murdering anymore.
At least not in Washington, D.C.
So where was this murder happening then?
In Washington, D.C. I think every murder or supposed murder that,
That's right. They were stopping them, of course.
Right.
There were attempted murders, but the precogs had found every one of them and prevented them from happening because of the pre-crime police, is what they're called.
Right.
And so this is the opening murder, showing you what they do. Tom Cruise does his little computer thing. He's got like these holographic, kind of like in what Iron Man did. Very similar to his computer. Jarvis.
Right, yeah, how he's got control over it just by moving his hands.
Right.
Tom Cruise wears these gloves that, I guess, connect him to the computer screen. But yeah, very kind of futuristic thing to be able to just move images with your motions.
Right. And during the scene, that was one of the first things that took me off guard, and I can't believe that it's only been out
11 years?
11 years, and this one already punches you kind of in the face, at least it did me, was when they were trying to find out where he was, the husband, they were trying to locate his position because he's about to commit the murder, the balls came down.
Right. With a red ball, they have a very short window to find the perpetrator.
Right. It's like,
because it's not a planned murder, so it's kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing.
Right.
And I don't remember what the time frame is, but I know that by the time they find the location, they've only got a matter of like seconds before they can stop it.
But in 2054, I mean, did people stop using smartphones? They would have been able to triangulate his position easy with today's technology. Back then, not so much.
Right. Back then, smartphones weren't around yet.
Yeah.
We had cell phones, but we didn't have smartphones.
Right. So I found that very interesting to watch with today's technology because it's such a part of today's...
Right.
And you're just like, well, GPS. So, anyway.
The Find Your Friends app.
Yeah, find your friends. Find my iPhone. Or where's my iPhone?
Find Your Murderer app.
Yeah, find the murderer. I like that. But they find him through a really cool thing that wouldn't have been able to take place if they had GPS, which was where he was able to see they had some clips, basically, of the images from the precogs.
Mm-hmm.
And a boy was in one spot in the picture, and then he was in another spot. And then when he was able to take the two clips and move them back and forth real quick, he could see that the boy looked like he was going around in a circle. And that's where they noted that it was a merry-go-round. And they also mentioned subtly that there's only a few merry-go-rounds left that were preserved, I guess.
Right.
And that's how they were able to narrow it down pretty well.
Right. Yeah, they have to basically determine the location of the murder solely off the images provided by the precogs. And a lot of times they only are given fragmented images, and so it's difficult for them to figure out the location, which is actually part of a big part of the whole movie.
Right, because they have to piece this stuff together.
Right.
Yeah.
And that the opening scene, I think, is really cool, and it's also kind of suspenseful because this murder is about to happen, and it's close, especially when they get to the park, and every townhouse looks the exact same.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom Cruise is looking around. His character's name is John Anderton. Anderton's looking around, and he's like, "Which house is it?" And that's just like it keeps cutting back between Tom Cruise and the actual house where the murder is about to take place, and we're seeing it unfold. Like all the fragmented images we got at the very, very beginning of the movie are starting to kind of come together, and we're seeing what's happening. And we know that he finds his wife with another man, and he's about to stab her with like a pair of scissors, unless John Anderton can get there in time. So it's cool. It's a nice little edge of your seat moment in the very beginning, and sets up the movie nicely. That we know now exactly what these guys do. They're pre-crime cops. They stop murders before they happen. And
I found it interesting. I was watching the opening action scene, and I'm thinking, even though it was different, it just reminded me of an older Spielberg, about how he was able to take those moments like from Indiana Jones and just open it up with a really cool, and this is a futuristic one,
mm-hmm.
but it just kind of had that edge of your seat, Spielberg. You have John Williams doing the music, which nothing really stood out with, his score with this movie for me.
Right. I agree. It actually, to me, there was a moment, just one moment in particular, I feel like it didn't fit. It stood out because I didn't feel it fit the scene very well. It was just one moment.
Really?
Yeah, it just had kind of an Indiana Jones-ish flair to it. Mm-hmm. And in the scene, it was more of a... I wish I could remember what scene it was. It might have been after he gets his eyes cut out, right after he gets
I think that might have been the
spiders.
scene that sparked it, actually, for me. Was thinking about that whole Indiana Jones thing. Yeah, it kind of had the Indiana Jones, a little bit of Star Wars. Just it had that inspiration almost.
Mm-hmm. It was, you could tell. I mean, you can always kind of tell. I think when you hear a John Williams score that it's John Williams, which isn't a bad thing. But I felt for that scene in particular, it just needed something a little darker, and it had like kind of the little, just the flightiness that John Williams scores kind of have, like with the horns. Mm-hmm. And I just, for that one scene especially, I didn't feel like it fit. But the rest of the movie, I thought it was fine. But like you said, it didn't really stand out. There was nothing. Like if you were to ask me to hum the Minority Report music right now, I couldn't do it.
Right.
But that's not
which is
necessarily
odd,
a sign of a
very
bad
odd
score.
for John Williams.
That's true. It's more subtle, I guess, for him.
But I liked it.
The music works. I think music is a big addition to suspense a lot of times in these scenes, and obviously it worked because even now knowing, I haven't seen the movie in a little while, but knowing what happens, I still felt like I was kind of in suspense.
Yeah. Yeah, it had been a while for me, too. I don't remember the last time I watched this movie. But it seemed like I couldn't remember what was going to happen.
Right.
At all. But when the scene happened, it was like unraveling for me. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which was cool, because I kind of got to watch it again.
Right.
But as the stuff happens, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. But it was still... I really enjoyed the movie this time as well.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
I think it was the first movie Tom Cruise ever did with Steven Spielberg. And they would go on to make another movie, War of the Worlds. And Steven Spielberg doesn't really seem to be making movies like this anymore. He's kind of, and I'm just basing this off the last two movies he's made, War Horse and Lincoln. But I love this movie, and I actually am a fan of War of the Worlds. I know.
Oh, I love War of the Worlds.
I know some people don't like it, but I think it's awesome, and so I wouldn't mind seeing Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg teaming up again for some other. Doesn't even have to be sci-fi, but just like another Spielberg film.
Well, I felt like when War of the Worlds came out, he kind of was starting to get that whole thing, like you were saying, where he wasn't doing those kind of movies anymore.
Uh-huh.
And then he came out with War of the Worlds.
Right.
And what did he do after that?
War of the Worlds, 2005 is when War of the Worlds came out, and that was another year where he put two movies out in the same year. He put out War of the Worlds during the summer, and then Munich at the end of the year, and Munich got nominated for a Best Picture Oscar.
I didn't watch Munich for a long time, because I was like, the trailer didn't interest me, and I was like, I'm sorry, Mr. Spielberg, but I can't do this one. I ended up renting it on Netflix, I think a year or two later, and I was like, I'm sorry I doubted you.
Yeah, Munich's really good.
Awesome.
That's another one that I haven't seen in a long time, but I remember really liking Munich a lot, even though it's a little long. But
yeah. No, I was hoping I'd get the same effect with War Horse. I didn't. Right. I wasn't the biggest fan of War Horse, but...
yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's this weird thing now, and I'm just basing this off of movie podcasts and just from a couple of other people that I know personally, who it just seems like it's popular to kind of bash Spielberg lately. I know some people kind of consider him to be a hack or a ripoff of a Hitchcock wannabe sometimes. But personally, other than the occasional misfire like Indiana Jones 4, I like, most of Spielberg's filmography. I
do too. I consider him the god of directors.
Right.
I mean, I consider him the greatest director of all time. So, he's Steven Spielberg.
Mm-hmm. I definitely consider him a living legend, for sure. If you just look at the movies that he's made, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, this movie, Minority Report.
Did you say Jaws?
No, Jaws, of course. Jaws. I mean, and now even his later movies. Munich is really good. Warhorse got a Best Picture nomination, even though we both kind of, I think, agree that maybe it's not his best film. And Lincoln was really good. And it also got a Best Picture nomination.
I have not gotten to watch Lincoln yet.
Yeah, so his movies are kind of going in a different direction, and they're, I guess, maybe maturing, if you want to say that. They're more. I mean, he seems to be making more dramas now than kind of these action adventure types. But I will still go see any Spielberg movie that comes out in theaters.
What was that sci-fi that hasn't come out yet that was supposed to be working on?
His next movie was supposed to be a movie called Robopocalypse, I think.
Yeah.
Which, I have no idea what it's about, but just the title of it makes me feel like it was similar to, I envision a movie like Pacific Rim. Giant robot type thing.
I gotcha.
But I
don't know how excited I'd be about that.
Well, it just comes, like I said, that's speculation on my part. I have no idea if that's what the movie's actually about or not.
Right.
But, with anything, I probably would just wait for a preview and then judge it from there. According to IMDb, he's got 4 upcoming projects, and the only one that I've really heard of is Pirate Latitudes, which is based off of a Michael Crichton book that was actually released after Michael Crichton died.
I recently got that book, actually.
I read it back when it first came out, and I don't remember much about it. But I also remember thinking it was just okay when I read it.
Interesting.
But from what I also understand, it was a manuscript that was found on his computer after he died, so it might not have even been finished. It just didn't seem that strong for a Michael Crichton book. So maybe, I don't know if it got published before, he died, or if he died before he had a chance to rewrite it or get it to where he wanted it to be, or what. But
what do you consider a strong Michael Crichton book?
Wow, it's been a while since I've read a Michael Crichton book. Jurassic Park is obviously pretty good, although the movie's better. Sphere is really good.
I started Sphere back when I was in middle school. I didn't get very far, and then I ended up watching. I got it because I think the movie was coming out.
Right.
And I liked the movie too.
Yeah, the movie's awesome. We can do a podcast on that one day.
Yeah.
And I've read The Andromeda Strain, and I've read Rising Sun, and I remember liking Rising Sun, and I remember liking both of them, but it's been so long, I honestly don't remember a whole lot about either one of them.
I told you I read half of Jurassic Park, and the only full Michael Crichton book that I've read was Congo, which I wasn't actually that impressed with. It just was a little bland, and the movie was worse.
Right.
Oh my gosh, the movie was so bad. I went back and watched it after I finished reading it, and that's a movie I saw in the theater, and it was worse than I remembered. I remember I didn't like the movie, but wow. When was the last time you saw Congo?
I actually recently started to rewatch it a couple of weeks ago.
That's interesting.
I had not seen it in a long time either. I remember really liking it as a kid, but I think it's just because it was associated with Jurassic Park in the sense that it was written by Michael Crichton.
Right.
But I had the poster on my wall, and every morning I'd wake up and see this giant gorilla face looking at me. But no, yeah, when we sat down to rewatch it the couple weeks ago, it's pretty bad. And part of the problem is it's, while I respect it because it was before the days of CGI, it's just so blatantly obvious that there's just people in gorilla suits throughout the whole thing.
Did you finish it?
No, I didn't. I think I fell asleep.
The further you get into it, the worse it gets.
Right.
So.
And I was actually kind of sad I remember Bruce Campbell was in it, and I knew he was in the beginning, and his scream that he lets out right before it cuts to, our main characters, I was like, know, if hopefully Bruce Campbell doesn't listen to this or won't hear this.
We've mentioned him twice.
I know.
So he might contact us soon.
But I thought his scream was really weak. Like I felt like he held back or something. He should have delved into his Evil Dead 2 days and did a scream like that.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking his scream was really cheesy. But then again, the whole movie's cheesy, so...
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. Back to Minority Report.
Right. Back to a good movie.
What were we talking about? We had the red-colored balls. Oh, Colin Farrell is in this scene, too. And I don't think it was revealed until a little bit later what he was doing there.
He's introduced after they stop the murder, and that guy is arrested for the... I don't know what they would call it, for the...
Attempted murder.
Was it attempted murder?
Well, he didn't
I thought it was the future murder. I think they called it... I think when they arrested him, they said, we're arresting you for the future murder of so-and-so.
Yeah.
They didn't call it attempted murder.
Right.
And so Colin Farrell's character, Danny, is introduced as is he a federal investigator, would you say? He's looking into the pre-crime system.
I believe it was a senator or something that...
Sent him out.
Yeah.
But he was a cop. He was an investigator.
Yes. He had a warrant.
Right.
But I was going to mention that he brings up some points, like questions I think that kind of flutter through the entire movie. How can you arrest someone for something they didn't do?
Right. And I remember in that scene, Tom Cruise does a pretty good job of explaining it by he tosses the ball down the desk, and Colin Farrell catches it before it falls.
Right.
And he goes, "Why'd you catch that?" Colin Farrell says, "Because it was going to fall." And he goes, "But it didn't. You stopped it from happening." But it doesn't change the fact that it was going to happen.
Right.
So that was interesting. Although it still raises, obviously, a very big question as to the fact that these people didn't commit these crimes, and yet they're still being punished.
Well, at the end of the movie, which I don't think it's a big deal to bring up.
We've stopped giving our little disclaimer, but we'll go ahead and just do a small one here. If you haven't seen Minority Report, don't listen to this podcast yet. Every movie we talk about in detail, so you'll always want to watch the movie before you listen.
Yeah. We haven't hit any spoilers yet, so it's
right.
Safe to bring it up now. They mention at the end that all the prisoners were released.
Right.
So I think
it said all of them were unconditionally pardoned and released, although many of them were kept under close watch or surveillance by the police department.
So, but I think that kind of goes to answering, the question for the audience, at least as far as the standpoint of the movie goes, is these people should not have been arrested because they didn't commit a crime. Right.
Well, that's the whole point of the movie. I mean, the Minority Report, the title, is referring to the fact that every now and again, Agatha, especially there's three precogs, like we said before. One's name is Agatha, one's is Dashiell, and the other one is Arthur, I believe. They're all named after authors: Dashiell Hammett, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and Agatha Christie. And Agatha, in particular, will get a different vision than the other two, and it's because it's an alternate future. It's another possibility of what could happen. And these Minority Reports are supposed to be deleted or destroyed immediately because it's a flaw in the system, essentially. It basically says that this person might not kill this person.
Mm-hmm.
And
that turns out to be a big thing later in the movie.
Huge.
And it's said many times in the film, she's the more talented of the three.
Right.
So
without her, even though the other two get visions, there really probably would be no pre-crime without her. Although it does say that even without one of them, it might not work as well because they're all three connected. They say it's a hive mind. Like you almost need all three for it to really work.
Yeah. So
I have a question, actually. One of the notes I wrote was, I haven't read the Philip K. Dick short story. I'd like to if I could find it. But I wonder if Danny, Colin Farrell's character, was actually in the original story. Because a lot of the exposition that we're given in the beginning about pre-crime and how it works and who the precogs are is all told to Danny because he's there to investigate. And then he becomes a huge player in the movie because he's the one jumping ahead. We find out that John Anderton, there's a vision of John Anderton killing somebody, and he becomes pretty much the cop on John Anderton's trail throughout the rest of the movie. So if he isn't, I could see how he could be in the story, but I also could see how the screenwriters came up with his character as a way to get all the information across to the viewer.
Yeah. But he was a good character. I liked him a lot.
He was awesome. And a note about Colin Farrell. This was the first movie I remember noticing Colin Farrell in. I didn't know who Colin Farrell was until after this movie. And he did a great American accent. Not once did I ever realized during watching this movie that he was Irish. And it wasn't actually until the DVD came out that I popped in the special features and it showed an interview with Colin Farrell, and he was all like, "Oh yeah, Steven Spielberg is great." And I was like, what?
Yeah, I think Colin Farrell gets my vote for best American accent from the guy that has the thickest accent I have ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Very strong.
I didn't know until I saw an interview either. I mean, I had seen Daredevil, and
he's even actually kind of doing an Irish accent in Daredevil.
Well, telephone booth,
phone booth, yeah, phone booth.
Yeah,
was,
phone booth.
He did
right.
good in that, yeah, good accent.
So, yeah, it wasn't until I saw an interview that I found out how Irish he was. So, his American accent is amazing. So, was there anything important to talk about before we get to the vision of John Anderton?
I don't think so. I mean, we've covered essentially that whole first act of the movie is just showing you what pre-crime does, and then also explaining who the precogs are and how their visions are pretty much what fuels pre-crime.
Right. Was there anything specific about when Danny went into the precogs?
The temple?
Yeah. Oh, that's where you see a vision for the first time. Agatha jumps up out of the water and grabs John and asks him, "Can you see?" And it was an image of this girl drowning.
Right. And that's when we first find out that every now and again the precogs will get what they call an echo of a past murder. And protocol is to delete the footage.
Yeah. So shortly after that, that's when there's a vision, and they have the balls carve the names, and
the future murder.
Yeah, the future murder, and the perpetrator is John Anderton, and he's killing a guy named
Leo Crow.
Leo Crow, who he has no idea who it is.
Right. And it's not a red ball, so it's not going to happen anytime soon. Was
it not? I thought it was.
It's not a red ball, because it doesn't happen for another 20-something hours, I think, which is how John Anderton is able to go on the run.
That's true, yeah, because the tech guy was going to grab the ball.
Right.
And he's like, "I got it." He's like, "We've got time. Why don't you go get
grab a piece of cake or something, yeah.
Yeah, cake.
I don't remember what they're celebrating, but yeah, it's because John Anderton is like the chief of, or not the chief, but the top investigator, maybe, or whatever you want to call it, of pre-crime. So his technician calls him in and says, I can't remember what the color of the premeditated murder ball is, but he's like, "We have a brown ball or whatever." And he goes, "A premeditated murder?" He's like, "People are still doing that these days?"
That's right.
And as he's going through the images, he sees his own face and realizes that he's got quite a problem on his hands.
But he's the only one that's seen it, that saw it, except the witnesses that he pulls up. Did they see it?
Right. Every time he goes through the precogs visions, there's two witnesses who are kind of Skyping their way into this room. They're not actually present. And she sees something. I don't know if she recognizes that it was him, because she asks, she goes, "What am I looking at here?" And then he immediately turns her monitor off.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's true.
So it's it's clear that at the time being, John Anderton is the only one who has really seen that it was him. But like you said, he has no idea who Leo Crow is. He doesn't even know where it is. He has no idea why he would kill this guy. And so, but he knows that if anybody finds out, he's immediately going to get arrested for it. So he wants to know what's going on. And so he decides to make a run for it.
The guy that takes care of the precogs actually tells him, you've always been nice to me. I'll give you 2 minutes before I hit the alarm.
That's right. He's the only one that sees it. Yep, you're right about that. I forgot. Because the temple is kind of connected to the main room where they're looking through the visions. And after he sends his technician away and he turns off the witness monitor, he watches the footage again and he sees himself shoot this guy. But he forgets about Wally. Wally is down in the temple and he can see the footage too. And I thought that was a great moment. He's like, "You've always been good to me. I'll give you a 2-minute head start before I hit the alarm."
Yep.
That was cool. And John doesn't waste any time. Pretty sure he runs right away.
Yeah. Runs into Danny in the elevator.
Oh, yeah. Which is a cool,
Because he thinks he's in trouble for the drugs.
That's right. We haven't even touched on that.
Or Danny thinks that he's acting all, nervous about being in trouble because he mentions, you're in trouble.
Right.
And then Danny thinks it's these drugs, which he has been taking because his son disappeared
6 years ago,
and that's what got him into the pre-crime police in the first place.
Try to stop something like that from happening again. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So after the loss of his son, his wife leaves him, and he becomes addicted to a drug that's out on the street called Neuroin. I think it is. It's like, and it just looks like an inhaler, basically. And he's a functioning addict. He's able to do his job, it seems like, but he's also a drug addict, which is a problem. And so Danny does find out, and that's actually one of the notes I wrote about the scene. I actually don't remember if it happens before or after this confrontation in the elevator, but when Danny is searching John's apartment, I really like the lighting in Minority Report. It's really interestingly lit, where a lot of the lighting and the windows are overblown. Mm-hmm. All the actors are the correct are lit correctly, but everything else is just really hot. And I think they even put there's in the scene in the mall. I'm almost positive they put reflective surfaces on poles and columns and things to get that overblown quality. But in this one particular scene where Danny is in John's apartment, the lighting in that really reminded me of Blade Runner. And I wondered if Steven Spielberg was maybe inspired by some sci-fi flicks from the past, Blade Runner being one of them, which is also a Philip K. Dick story.
Oh, well, then that would totally make sense.
Right. And so, and Blade Runner's awesome. And I wondered if Spielberg kind of was maybe even throwing a little nod to Blade Runner in that scene. Just through the lighting, basically.
I need to watch Blade Runner again.
We'll do an episode on it. We say that every episode of some other movie.
We've got a lot to do.
But anyway, in that search of his apartment, he finds Neuroin inhalers.
Sounds like a Skyrim town.
Neuroin. It's like heroin and, something to do with your brain, obviously.
Yeah.
Neuroin.
Clever.
Right. And that's actually how the precogs came to be. They were all children of Neuroin addicts.
Oh, really?
And and there was a lot of them, I think. And they were doing, I guess, I watched the movie a couple days ago, so I didn't write it down. But I think they were doing maybe experiments on Neuroin children, and they kind of stumbled upon the fact that they were dreaming about future murders. They were dreaming about murders a lot. And then it was later they realized that they were dreaming about actual murders that were about to happen.
Only 3 of the children survived, though, and that's the three precogs that we have in the film. But yeah, Danny found these drugs in John's apartment. Why was he investigating?
Well, that's what I can't remember. I can't remember if the scene happens before or after he goes on the run. Okay. It would make sense to happen after.
No, it was before because that's why they ran. That's what
the elevator.
Yeah, the elevator thing. And so he's leaving, and then you have that scene you were talking about, the cars.
Mm. We missed one important scene where Tom Cruise goes to Max von Sydow and tells him that he found, or he wants to know about Anne Lively because there's some missing info about Anne Lively. And then after that is when the pre-crime or the pre-murder, or whatever you want to call it.
So why was he looking for, besides the fact that he saw the vision, how did he find out it was Anne Lively? He wasn't there originally for Anne Lively, was he? Because the guy pulled up an image and I thought it turned out to be the same thing.
I don't remember how he figured out who the murderer was. Oh, you know what? It's because there's not very many drownings. He gets intrigued by the vision that he saw from Agatha.
That's right.
Especially when Agatha says, "Can you see?" So he goes to see the technician who oversees all the prisoners, I guess. And he was like, I'm looking for someone who drowned a woman. And they pull up this John Doe who had never been identified. And he was going to murder a woman named Anne Lively. And when they wanted to watch Agatha's prevision, it was gone. It was missing. So then he was like, well, where's Anne Lively now? And that info was missing as well. And he said not only was hers was not the only one that was missing. He said he spent a few hours down there, and there was at least a dozen other prisoners who had missing files. Which I think is all the Minority Reports. Every time Agatha had a different vision, they got rid of it.
Right. Minority Report is where...
Not many people know about the Minority Report. Anderton is told about the Minority Report by the woman who created pre-crime or who invented pre-crime. And Chief Anderton, who's, like I said, like the top guy of pre-crime, or at least the top cop, if you want to call it that, because I guess Max von Sydow would be like really the top guy. He didn't even know about that there was such a thing as Minority Report. Tom Cruise didn't. So I don't think there's many people within the pre-crime department, other than Max von Sydow, that knows about the fact that every now and again Agatha has a conflicting vision. Because if that was the case, pre-crime would be shut down immediately. And that's what Tom Cruise, that's what John Anderton kind of comes to. When he finds out that there's such a thing as Minority Report, he's immediately taken aback because he's like, have I put away innocent people? People who may not have committed a murder? And he believes he's one of those people.
That's right. He kidnaps Agatha.
Mm-hmm. Because he needs to see her Minority Report on him.
And she tells him that it's not one.
Right. There is no Minority Report for him, which means he is going to kill Leo Crow.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, he still doesn't even know who Leo Crow is or where the murder takes place.
Before he kidnaps Agatha is a very important scene.
Yeah.
Which is how he gets into the facility.
Back into... Yeah, we haven't even touched on the fact that in the future, I guess there are IDs now. Like, I wonder if the people even carry around driver's license or anything anymore. But there's...
I highly doubt it. I mean, they're going through malls.
Right.
And the advertisement billboards, which are holograms in the malls, are specifically speaking to the people because it's reading their eyes, and it can call them out by name and have information about what they bought.
Right.
And
they have these things called ident, something or other. Ident. Well, whatever. They have these machines that scan your eye and knows exactly who you are immediately. So when he first goes on the run, he has a hard time of getting away from them because he gets on the subway and it immediately knows that he's on that subway because it scanned his eye. One of the cool things about the subway train is there's a cameo from another writer-director. Cameron Crowe is the man reading the newspaper who kind of identifies John Anderton. Tom Cruise had made Vanilla Sky the year before, and which Cameron Crowe directed, and Steven Spielberg actually has a cameo in Vanilla Sky.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Vanilla Sky is an awesome movie.
Vanilla Sky is one I need to revisit. When I saw it in the theater, it was not what I was expecting, and I hated it. And I had to rewatch it again for a college class, actually. And I remember liking it more the second time around. But honestly, I think that's the last time I watched it, so it's been at least 10 years since I've seen it.
Wow. I love Vanilla Sky.
Really?
Yeah.
So in order to get back into the pre-crime department without being detected, he essentially has to get new eyeballs.
Well, that's just to stop being seen everywhere.
Right.
And that's when... Why was the pre-crime police at the apartment, or the apartment complex that he was stashed, or that he was hiding in?
It's the apartment of the doctor who does the surgery.
Right.
Why
and they're gone.
I think the police are... So after he gets the surgery, he's got bandages over his eyes, and the doctor tells him, you have to leave the bandages on for 12 hours, otherwise you will go blind. Do not take the bandages off, or you will go blind.
They do some suspense with the surgery, too, because right when they're getting ready, when he's putting on the eyepiece on his head, right before the guy does that, he tells him, oh, you don't remember me, huh? You put me away.
For a long time.
And he said...
took away my license to practice medicine.
The line that really sticks out is when he says, it was, great getting to know myself better, having the opportunity to get to know myself better all those years. Now I'm going to return the favor.
Yeah.
And just what is this guy going to do to John? But he does the surgery, right? And... but the pre-crime police are there.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was a specific building they were going after, or if they were just searching the area, going from building to building, perhaps. But they send out these devices called spiders because they look a lot like spiders.
They actually look more like the tripods from War of the Worlds,
like mini tripods.
Yeah,
they kind of do actually. But these things are basically little eye scanners that go throughout the apartment and scan every person in the building. They've done a heat signature on the building, and they know that there's 27 or 28 bodies in there. And they make an announcement, which I guess maybe that's police protocol or something, but I feel like they would have actually captured him had they not made the announcement that they were there and that they were doing a scan.
That's true.
Because he hears it, and he immediately tries to block his heat signature by getting into the bathtub, getting into a bathtub full of ice.
But how many people would have thought of that?
To get into a bathtub full of ice?
Yeah.
Well, he thought of it because he's a part of the department, so he knows that they're looking for heat signatures, and that he can get rid of his by doing that.
Right.
And then the spiders won't know to find him because they can't find his heat signature.
Right.
However, a little air bubble, because he submerges himself underwater and holds his breath for quite a long time, it seems. But a little air bubble from his nose pops out of the water, and right as the spider, in very Spielbergian fashion, the spiders were just about to leave the room, and hears the little pop of the air bubble, and then comes back, and they start tasing him essentially to get him out of the water. And then he has to raise the bandage off his eye, which obviously it hasn't been 12 hours yet, so he's running the risk of being blind, but he also is running the risk of being arrested if he doesn't do it. He's able to get the bandage off right before... And so, as the spiders are tasing him, and he's trying to get the bandage off his eye, the cops realize that heat signature has come back, and that they can't get him to scan his eye. They can't get the eye scan. So they're running up the stairs to get to this room to see who the suspect is, or who the person is. And fortunately, John gets the bandage off his eye just in time for the spider to make a scan.
Well, the spiders actually are ripping it off his face.
No, he's lifting it.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they scan it, and it's not his eyeballs anymore, so...
Yeah, luckily it was time to take off the bandage, pretty much, so his eyes were healed enough.
I don't know how early it had been, but I was assuming that it wasn't time yet, which is why he didn't want to do it. I mean,
I think it was pretty close.
Really?
And he was just being extra cautious, because it showed the timer throughout that scene.
Yeah, where was the timer? I thought it was at like 6 hours or something.
That's how
like
long
it was only halfway.
Oh, it was 12 hours.
One thing about that scene that I've kind of got a question about, and it's not just this scene. I'm very curious about. There's a lot of gross out moments in this movie. Well, 3 in particular. The first one is when John first goes on the run. The cops have these weapons called sick sticks, and we don't see what it does until they try to use it on John, and he like blocks the blow and shoves the sick stick into another officer, and it immediately makes him like projectile vomit all over the place.
I missed that.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, you got to watch it again. They call them sick sticks, and apparently as soon as you get hit with a sick stick, you immediately start throwing up. And then in this scene, there's actually right before he takes the eyes out, the doctor like blows his nose or sneezes.
Oh yeah,
or
I noticed that.
And there's just like a nasty amount of snot like hanging out of his nose. And then after his eyes are taken out, and he's got the bandages on, he's essentially blind. The doctor tells him there's a sandwich and milk in the fridge if you want. And so John makes his way to the fridge and is feeling around, and we see that there's a perfectly good sandwich in there and a perfectly good bottle of milk in there. But there's also an old decaying sandwich in there and a green bottle of milk. Who knows how long that bottle of milk has been in there? And I don't know if the doctor figures he has a 50-50 chance of getting the right one and is doing that on purpose, or if he's just hasn't cleaned it out and doesn't care.
The place looked pretty slobbish.
It looked terrible.
But I thought it was funny how he went for the sandwich.
Bit into the gross one, of course.
And then he had moved the milk jug a little bit, trying to find this stuff. Uh-huh. And then the second time, I think he had touched the clear milk. Of course he did.
He did. He touched the correct one at first.
But then he grabs the bad one right after the sandwich. So I'm wondering what he's thinking. Like, this guy's a jerk.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
Just put bad food in here.
Guess I'm going to starve. But I felt like I didn't really understand the reasoning behind any... I mean, the sick stick makes sense because, I mean, it's a weapon, I guess, that the cops are attempting to use on him. And it can incapacitate you pretty well, I guess. If you just immediately start throwing up, you're probably not going to run much anymore. But the snot part and the sandwich part, I really didn't see the reasoning behind it, other than just to be gross.
Yeah, I think when I saw the snot scene, I was like, that's just there to grab your attention and just really bring you back, like full focus.
Right.
That's
I'm curious what Spielberg or the writers or whatever were thinking when they wrote those scenes. Like, why? I just didn't really see the point of it, but whatever.
Yeah. So he has the new eyes. He gets out. They leave, and then is that when he goes to kidnap Agatha?
Yes.
All right.
The doctor also gives him this weird device that like essentially paralyzes his face.
Right.
Turns it into mush, I believe is how he puts it. And so he also uses that on his face to get into the building without being detected because he doesn't look like John anymore.
Right.
Which, by the way, I don't think, even if that device existed, I don't think paralyzing your face like that would make your entire face to just completely sag.
Did he say it paralyzes it? I thought
it did, yeah.
I thought it was just a mutation almost that would just change the way he looked. Like, he didn't look... It looked like Tom Cruise still, but it didn't, you know?
Right. It basically just made his face, like, go to mush, like he said. Like, just completely, like, sag all over the place. I do like the actor that plays the doctor, Dr. Eddie. Peter Stormare. He's a good character actor. He's been in Coen Brothers movies, Fargo. He was a Russian astronaut in Armageddon. Yeah, he calls it a temporary paralytic enzyme.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
The thing that really I didn't understand with that one was if he's on the run, why do his eyes still have access to be able to open doors for clearance?
Right. Well, maybe that's a good question. I never thought about that. Not even the new eyes, his old eyes, because he keeps his old eyes so that he can get into the temple. But you're right. If he's really a person of interest,
they just left access to the most secret doors.
They would cut off his clearance.
Yeah.
Well, Without it, he couldn't get Agatha, so...
Yeah, so he gets in, he gets Agatha.
You have to go with it. Mm-hmm.
And he gets chased out of there, doesn't he?
Out of the temple? Or out of the pre-crime building?
Yeah, he didn't just get away. Well, that's right. He flushed himself down. They flushed down the tube. And the guy, the keeper of the precogs, was not too happy about that.
He was not. So the precogs, yeah, they are always lying in what he called the milk. But it was like a nutrient, so it kept them fed, I guess. And it also, I think, helped their visions. I think it had something to do with that as well. But it was basically like they're all lying in a pool. Always. And so, like every pool, it has a drain. And so he essentially...
Big enough to
why
fit
there's
people through.
Two people. Two people.
Yeah.
Because it looked like he was holding onto her. So it was pretty big drain. And yeah, it just flushes it like a toilet, and down they go. And I guess end up in like some river or something. I don't remember where they come out.
And when... I think before he kidnaps her, he's going through the mall, and his new eyes get scanned. They call him Mr.
Yakimoto.
Yeah. Did they explain where the eyeballs come from?
I don't believe so.
So I'm wondering, one, if Yakimoto is dead.
Possibly. And it's possible he just died of natural causes, and they stole his eyes and put it on the black market or something.
I just wondered if there would be a death record of that, because the mall seemed to act like he had just recently been there.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you
just
like
recently
this?
Bought tank tops or something, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe he's out there. Maybe Mr. Yakimoto needed new eyes. Although I feel like that would raise red flags too, as soon as he got scanned with eyes that were from another criminal.
Right. Yeah, the eyeball thing was kind of something to think about.
Well, the precogs only really see future murders. They don't really ever see future eye gougers. So maybe he just stole his eyes. He does, Tom Cruise's character in the very beginning of the movie does talk to a drug dealer who takes off his glasses and has no eyeballs.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that is a crime that is happening on the streets of Washington, D.C., where
That's true, kind of like...
people are getting their eyes stolen.
Yeah, instead of tennis shoes. Mm-hmm. Jordans. Yeah, very interesting. The visual effects in that scene did not hold up.
In the empty eye socket scene? Yeah. Well, what can you do?
I mean, how do you have Jurassic Park?
And then 9 years later have that?
Just simple eye sockets. So
John has Agatha, and he's still running from the pre-crime cops. But the reason that he's kidnapped Agatha is he wants to find his minority report. He wants to see Agatha's vision of his murder to see what is different about it. And he gets the bad news that there is no minority report, which means he is going to kill Leo Crow. And shortly after he captures or kidnaps her, there's a cool scene with them escaping the cops where she knows the future, and so she helps him escape from the cops by telling him to stop right here, grab this umbrella, which the umbrella is just for the rain. But it's a cool scene where they essentially hide out in the open behind some balloons and get away from the cops. I remember even in the theaters, I was like, that was a cool scene. But shortly after he kidnaps Agatha, he sees his first clue as to the location of the murder, which is originally they thought there was a third guy outside the window of the apartment, or of the hotel perhaps. They weren't sure what it was. And he realizes that it's a picture of a man on a billboard, and they're raising the billboard like as soon as they get out of the mall, I'm pretty sure, which leads him directly to go. He kind of, I guess, can figure out where the placement of the billboard is going to figure out where the
he looks when he sees the billboard. He looks at his watch because he has set a timer as to when the murder is supposed to take place, and he has 12 minutes left.
That's right. So he's getting really close, and Agatha is pleading with him at this point to just walk away. She's like, you know your future, you can change it. You don't have to go into this building. And if it was me, I obviously, like John Anderton, would be very curious as to who Leo Crow is and why I would want to kill him. But I think to hopefully escape being arrested, I would have taken I would like to think that I would take Agatha's advice right then. And I would have at least gone somewhere to hide out for the next 12 minutes and then maybe gone to maybe search that apartment or something. But of course that would make for kind of a boring movie. So he goes immediately to search for Leo Crow. And they finds the apartment, and scattered all over the bed of the apartment or of the hotel room is they're pictures of kids, and most notably John's son, Sean.
Which I made a note in my head just watching that. I was like, why are there pictures all over the bed? But they later go into that.
Right.
Like as to I was just like that's a little, Hollywood-esque movie thing.
To have pictures all over the bed like that.
I was like, that's kind of cliche.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes sense, like, a few minutes later.
Right. So it's a very suspenseful scene where Leo Crow enters the room and confesses to the murder of John's son. And John pulls out his gun, just like he does in the vision, and the murder is about to happen when suddenly it doesn't.
Yeah, Agatha pipes up and is like, you have the choice. You've seen your future. You have a choice.
Yeah. And so I thought I think it's a really cool moment when John just starts reading him his rights.
Oh yeah.
His voice is like breaking. He's like he's pretty much crying. He was crying, I think, when he finds the pictures of his son.
I'm wondering if he's still fighting.
Oh, I'm sure he is.
The trigger.
Uh-huh. And then quickly after that happens, after he starts reading him his rights, Leo Crow starts freaking out, and he's like, "You're not going to kill me?" And we find out that Leo Crow was hired to pretend or to confess to killing Sean when he actually had nothing to do with it. And he says, "He told me you would kill me. My family will get nothing if you don't kill me." And John, upon hearing this, is even more confused now. But still decides not, he's going to just take Leo Crow in. But Leo Crow grabs his gun, and I'm assuming pushes on his finger or something, but fires the weapon into Leo Crow's chest, and Leo Crow falls out. So to all the police, it looks as if John Anderton has committed the murder he was supposed to commit.
Right. It looks identical to the image, except for the fact, which they weren't able to see, that they were struggling. And
it doesn't happen when it's supposed to. The alarm goes off. When the alarm goes off, right after the alarm goes off on John's watch is when he starts reading his rights.
Right.
So he did change the future.
And then you go back and look, though, how would they have had this vision if it wouldn't have happened without the vision?
Right.
So that's...
it's kind of there's with like time travel. I mean, this isn't a time travel movie, but it's a movie where you can see into the future. So there's that kind of element of time travel ish. But I feel like with a lot of time travel movies, there's always problems like that. There's always issues that arise like that. So the murder just happened. John flees the scene with Agatha because he knows that obviously they're gonna think he murdered the guy because that's pretty much how it looks. And this is when Danny sees all the pictures on the bed. And he lets us know that it's not real, essentially. He knows immediately, really, that it's not real. And he's also the only one who's ever seen, in the room anyway, who's ever been to like an actual homicide investigation, like a crime scene like that. Because a lot of these guys who are working on pre-crime are fairly new to the department. I feel like that's also a little bit of a stretch. I feel like there'd be more people on the department that would have... I mean, murders have stopped within the last 6 years. Yeah. A lot of these guys are look like in their maybe late 30s, early 40s. I feel like a lot of them would probably have seen a crime scene, a murder, a homicide scene.
Yeah.
But anyway, he says, he's the only one in the room that has ever been to a homicide crime scene. And he's like, this is what we call an orgy of evidence. And he's like, in real homicide investigations, he's like, I've never seen evidence displayed like this. He's like, this is... I don't know if he knows it's a setup right away yet. But he knows that it's a...
He says right at the end of that scene that it is, and that was shortly after he... Yeah. So he investigates it more, and he comes across the
Anne Lively footage.
Right.
And he brings it up to Max von Sydow's character, who promptly shoots Danny.
I liked his line, though.
That was yeah, it's cool. He's like, do you hear that? No alarm bells going off. No.
First he goes, silence.
Mm-hmm.
No alarm.
I don't hear any alarms because the precogs at the moment can't prevision murder. And then he shoots Danny's character. And blames it on John. Because he did it with John's gun.
That actually happened, it was right after that scene. And they say you're being arrested for the murder of...
That's right.
Of, what's his, Crow and
Leo Crow.
Yeah, and
Danny Whitworth.
Right.
That's right. He takes Agatha to his ex-wife's, I'm assuming. Are they divorced, or are they just, like, separated? I don't remember. It doesn't matter. He takes her...
They're divorced.
Okay,
yeah.
So he takes her to his ex-wife's home, where he's hiding out, but they find him there, and they arrest him.
And at this point, it hadn't shown... They still don't know who the murderer is of Agatha's mom. What's her name?
Anne Lively.
Yeah, Anne Lively.
Well, they don't know that she's dead at this point yet. Because they arrested the John Doe guy for the pre-murder of Anne Lively. And when they looked up where Anne Lively is today, the info was missing.
Right, I'm talking about John and Vaughn.
Max von Sydow?
Yeah.
Sydow?
What's his character's name? So I can call him by name.
Lamar Burgess is Max von Sydow's character's name.
So John, Burgess, and Danny, who's now dead, are really the only people, and Agatha, of course, know that...
Something's up with Anne Lively's case.
Right.
And John's ex-wife, Laura, or Laura, whatever. Because he tells her about it right before he gets arrested.
Right.
And she brings it up to Burgess. And Burgess plays it kind of, cool, doesn't know who she's talking about. But then he lets it slip at the end that he'll look up about a woman who was drowned however many years ago. And she was like, I never told you that she drowned. And then he's like, I've been caught.
So they put John Anderton in the frozen state.
Mm-hmm. Where they put all the pre-crime or future murder perpetrators.
Right. And then after his ex-wife has the conversation with Burgess, that's when she goes and frees John, right?
Mm-hmm. She takes a gun down to that technician. Tim Blake Nelson is the actor. Takes it down there, and she's like, I need to speak with my husband. And we don't see it happening, but, it's implied that she frees
Now, I
him.
just thought about this. They get their whole plan thing. Oh, it was a different time. Okay. I'm thinking that this was the same time as the press conference, but it was later that night when he was having an award ceremony.
Right. Yeah, Burgess was receiving a reward, or not a reward, an award for something. But it's a big event, black tie type thing.
Right, I think it has something to do with just probably celebrating pre-crime going national. Because I think they were expecting it to.
And at that gala, Burgess gets a phone call, an emergency phone call. And John is on the other end of the line. And he's threatening to expose the truth about Anne Lively. And basically what the truth is that he figured out a way to get away with murder. And that was he essentially framed a guy. Well, not framed a guy. He paid a guy to kill Anne Lively, knowing that he would get arrested for the pre-murder of Anne Lively. And then once he was arrested, and this was a moment that I thought was kind of
questionable,
unrealistic, perhaps. Yeah. Questionable, yes, questionable. Was that right after they arrest this John Doe character for the murder of Anne Lively, all of the police leave and just leave Anne Lively there by herself. They're like, you cool? All right, see ya. They just head out, leaving the door open for Max von Sydow's character, Burgess, to come in and dress just like the murderer was going to dress and actually murder Anne Lively. And the reason that he did it was because Anne Lively is the mother of Agatha, and she was a heroin addict, but she cleaned up and she wanted her daughter back. And Burgess knew that if she was able to get her daughter back, she would ruin pre-crime. And he needed pre-crime to work. It was his legacy. And so he murdered her.
What was the explanation with the ripples? Because to me it looked like the way the ripples were going in the first scene, the one that they used.
Yeah.
The ripples were not going in the right direction at all.
Well, that was what Danny was pointing out to Burgess, and that's why Burgess killed Danny, was the echo that they're supposed to delete, which I don't know why it's still there unless she dreams about it all the time, and they just are constantly deleting Anne Lively's murder. But the footage from the murder that they arrested the John Doe for, the wind is blowing, let's say, east to west, so it's pushing the water. The ripples are moving left to right. Or I'm sorry, that would be west-east. But in the echo murder, the one that they're constantly deleting, the wind is blowing in the opposite direction. So it's pushing the ripples of the water right to left. So it's like the camera's in the same place, the murderer's in the same place, but the wind is blowing in a different direction. And that's how Danny realized that they were two separate murders. And that's why Burgess killed him, because he figured it out.
Right. Well, at the award ceremony, they have the technician guy, and they're helping him out now, and he posts up the footage in the room of the actual murder, and that's when Burgess knows that he's going to be revealed, so he starts to head out.
Mm-hmm. And then a red ball goes off, because at this point Agatha's back. A red ball goes off because Burgess is going to kill John Anderton.
Right. And he doesn't.
No, it comes down to a final confrontation between John and Burgess, and John tells Burgess the same thing that Agatha kept telling John, and that's, you know your future, you can change it. But it puts Burgess in a difficult position. If he doesn't kill John, he's proved that the future can be changed, and they've put away people who may not have gone through with the murder, and the system is flawed and needs to be shut down. But if he does murder John, then he'll go away for life, essentially, for murdering John. So what does he do? Turns the gun on himself and kills himself, which changes the future, and pre-crime is shut down.
Yeah, but at least he doesn't have to be there to see it.
Right.
In his mind. He was apologizing, what seemed like, very genuinely to John. I'm sorry. I think he calls him my boy.
Yeah, I think he does. Forgive me, my boy.
Yeah. Very interesting scene.
Yeah. My biggest question about this movie that I noticed this time around was, when you have an echo murder, a murder that's going to happen in the same fashion as the original murder, I guess they have to happen at pretty much the same time, too. Like, pretty much how he did it. As soon as the cops went away, he murdered her. When there's an echo murder, why isn't there another red ball? Once the first murder is kind of... I mean, maybe it happens so fast, but why isn't... What stops the red ball from at least being carved out? Is it a computer thing? Does the computer recognize it as an echo and deletes the footage rather than carving a ball?
Well, another question is, when that murder was being viewed for the first time, or, predicted, why did the ball not come out with Burgess's name on it?
Burgess?
Yeah.
Well, it's because he originally hired somebody else to do it. They never identified him, so I don't know why the ball... Did the ball say John Doe, or was there no ball for that murder?
That's a big question.
And why... And then as soon as he gets arrested and Burgess goes through with the murder, and they see it as an echo, why is there not another ball carved out at least with Burgess's name on it, like you said, as the murderer. I feel like that's kind of a big plot hole, but
yeah, it makes sense that there would have been one for the first guy, even though he wasn't going to kill her.
He was hired to kill her, so I think he had every intention of killing her. If you don't actually think you're going to get away with it, like he didn't hire him to go take the rap for it, because then I don't think they would have ever had. I think then the ball would have said Burgess on it. Like, but that guy was planning on killing her, but got arrested for it because Burgess knew he was going to get arrested for it.
Right, but yeah, you're right. Why was there not a second one? Because you have a second person that's going to do the murder too. So there should have been two instances. Well, and it's the ball is really the question. Where was the ball?
Right. And so that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if technicians delete the footage so fast that no ball has a chance to be carved because they recognize it as a echo, or what? I don't know. That's pretty much all I have to talk about the movie, really.
Yeah, me too, I think.
What would you rate it?
I'm still very impressed with the movie. It's a good story, good movie. It's just fun to watch. I give Minority Report 4 out of 5 stars.
Nice. I agree with you. I think it holds up, just, other than maybe the eyeball scene in the very beginning. But I think it's incredibly entertaining, suspenseful, and I give it an A-. I would give it an A, but there's just a few moments in it that I think hurt the film. And it's mainly just those gross out moments for no reason. So I don't know. I'm leaning towards an A-.
Okay, cool.
Which is still pretty good.
Yeah, that's very good. And I consider my 4 out of 5 stars to be,
very good. Mm-hmm. So, there you have it. Let us know what you think about Minority Report. I know it's not a superhero movie, but the podcast is, primarily about superhero. I don't know why I'm saying this. Forget it.
There you have it. We both really liked Minority Report. We haven't done too many movies that we haven't liked. I want to start doing some movies that one of us hasn't seen, or both of us haven't seen.
Right.
Before, so
maybe next episode we'll talk about it.
Yeah. And once again, if anyone has a request of a movie that they'd like us to cover, any ideas as to helping the podcast out,
any feedback at all, let us know. Email us. Talk to us on Facebook. Whatever.
All right.
I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
Thanks for listening, guys.